Well, thank you for being with us today. Could you each tell me a little bit about where you were born and how you grew up and how you ended up here in Richmond?
Yeah,
at St.
sure.
Mary's?
So I'm from Stanton, Virginia, originally. Grew up there, going to St. Francis Parish, where we eventually got married. Went to school in Charlottesville, where we met. Lived in Northern Virginia for about 7 or 8 years. Came back to Charlottesville for graduate school and then wound up here in Richmond after job seeking. But found that it was a really nice sort of central spot. It's 2 hours away from Stanton. It's a couple hours away from Whitney's folks up in Vienna. So it's nice to stay in Virginia.
Yeah, we love Richmond. I grew up in Northern Virginia. I was born in D.C., but lived in Vienna and McLean growing up, and then ended up, and I'm Episcopalian. So I attended Holy Comforter Episcopal Church in Vienna growing up, and then went to Charlottesville for undergrad, to UVA for undergrad, and that's where I met Andrew. And then I went off to graduate school in New York City and attended Episcopal Church there, and then we got married and lived in Alexandria and McLean together for a while before we went back to Charlottesville for Andrew's time at business school, again at UVA, and then we moved here, like he said.
And was church or your faith an important part of your childhood?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's for both of us.
Yeah.
For me, it was a fairly traditional sort of Catholic upbringing at CCD all the way through. Something that was particularly formative for me was when we did confirmation prep. I had a really close group of friends in high school where we did some studying and just talking. And I remember a confirmation retreat that we went on that was particularly formative. We went out to the mountains and just, prayed, had Eucharistic adoration, all that sort of stuff, and just felt really connected. So that whole upbringing was really, really crucial for me, and gave me a foundation where I was able to continue, practicing in college and afterwards, regardless of where I left. So I'm really grateful for all of that.
I grew up, I was actually baptized Catholic at Holy Trinity in Georgetown, and my family found an Episcopal church that we sort of fell in love with when I was young. And so from about first grade on, I did my confirmation and communion. It's a little different in the Episcopal church, but we did a communion class and confirmation there. And I was pretty heavily involved. I was an acolyte from the time I was in middle school all the way up through high school. I captained my acolyte team. And I also was involved in the youth group and in a Bible study that was sort of a more intense, smaller group Bible study, which was really great. And during the summer, for 9 years, I attended music and drama camp at the Episcopal Camp and Conference Center in Shrinemont, which is in Boise, Virginia, in the valley, but north of Stanton. Near Woodstock, and that was extremely formative for me. It was it's actually the seat of the Diocese of Virginia. There's an outdoor cathedral there. The cathedral is a beautiful stone cathedral that's open to the outdoors. They say it has the highest ceiling of any cathedral in Virginia, or in the world. But there was just a lot of acceptance and a lot of encouragement and a lot of wonder and learning, and it was a really beautiful place. Music and drama camp was there were a lot of people who didn't necessarily fit in so well in school most of the time, and so we really felt like we were just unconditionally loved and accepted, and we really found God in one another and in our music and in the outdoors. And I went back and was a camp counselor for a year there, then right after college, and that was also a really exceptional experience, really formative for me. And then I continued to practice. I was in the Episcopal Fellowship and actually lived in the Episcopal house in college, and then we stayed involved. We were married a couple of years after that, after graduate school, and stayed involved.
Can you tell me about how you met and how you Oh, this is going to be a good story.
Yes.
You want me to take a stab?
Sure, why don't you start?
So we were both music majors in college, with studying other stuff on the side as well. But we met in music theory class. So she was a year younger than I. And we were in this Monday, Wednesday, Friday class that actually had a co-requisite musicianship class that was a Tuesday, Thursday thing. So at first I wasn't quite so sure about this girl, but she was clearly interested, and I was seeing her every single day because we were in these classes together. But
I wore him down after about a semester.
So
I knew. Well, and we actually had a few mutual friends, which was pretty funny because people I had gone to high school with that ended up living in his dorm. And so we were introduced by someone that I'd known from high school and he'd known through friends in his dorm. And then we discovered we had class together every day, which I was really thrilled about. And Andrew was not so certain. I think you were taking something like 23 credits at the time, including calculus,
right?
which ended up going by the wayside. But by the end of the semester, you finally decided it was a good idea to give it a try. And actually, we were realizing that in April of this year, that will have been 15 years ago. So I was 18 and you were 20, I think. So we were real young. And then we had our ups and downs, our journey from then, and then married 5 years later. I think so.
That's right.
So tell me a little bit about the journey, the engagement, the dating, and how you arrived at the decision that yes, we want to spend the rest of our lives together.
Certainly a critical point in all of that was when we were dating long enough where it felt like, okay, this could be getting serious, and I started thinking down the road. We're big planners. We both think really hard about all the decisions we make. So this is something that both of us were thinking a lot about and in the future, and realizing, okay, if this leads to marriage, she's Episcopalian, I'm Catholic, what's this going to mean? And so we had to have kind of a, fish or cut bait sort of conversation where I had to say, look, it's really important for me for my kids to be raised in the Catholic tradition and receive the sacraments and all of this, and that's kind of going to be a deal breaker for me. And we talked it out, and eventually, hopefully Whitney made the right choice.
Well, we're old souls, and so we were serious from the beginning. And it was really the first very serious relationship for both of us. And so I think even pretty early on, we did a lot of thinking about, is this going to work out in the long run? And we hemmed and hawed a lot. We knew that we loved each other, and we knew that we had a lot in common. And honestly, there are a lot of things that are similar about the faiths. They're not extremely disparate traditions. But as Andrew likes to say, the devil is in the details, perhaps literally. Right. And we, found ourselves doing a lot of thinking over the minutia, and we continue to do that. I think that's sort of the nature of coming from two faiths that are so close, or two traditions. I don't know if it's the same faith, but so we felt there were a lot of things. When you date so young, you have a lot of figuring out of yourself and how to have a relationship. And we actually split up for a couple of months. Which was a pretty big split and a very sort of fruitful time for both, a painful but fruitful time for both of us in having to pull back and really think hard about what was so important to us, and then also how we could form a more supportive relationship to one another. And we eventually found our way back together, and after that we pretty much knew that marriage was going to be coming eventually. And I did agree, and I don't remember exactly at what point, but after thinking hard about it, it was much more important to me that I have children with Andrew and raise them Catholic than with anybody else and raise them in my own tradition. And I didn't think that our opinions on things were going to really be a major problem to the way that we wanted to raise the kids together. So,
and one of the things I realized in Whitney was, here's a person who's just as passionate about her faith tradition as I am, and also someone who will challenge me about my beliefs. I would think if I had found a Catholic woman, it would have been a lot easier, but I probably would have so much more easily fallen into rote patterns of, I believe what I believe and don't really have to think about it too hard. But because of that dialogue and because of that challenge, I think both of us have really grown in a lot deeper ways than we had expected. So it's been pretty wonderful.
Yeah, having an ecumenical relationship is both a blessing and a challenge that continues now, and there will continue to be challenging, especially as the kids grow older, with how we navigate all of that, and we have not figured all of that out
Right.
just yet. But we do, the kids were both baptized in the Catholic Church, and we were married in the Catholic Church, and
Luke was baptized here, which is super exciting.
yeah, which was wonderful. Got the dunk, which was great.
Right.
But yeah, it has been a challenge from the beginning, but it's definitely been one I think that has forced us to really think hard and pray hard and pray together a lot, and we value that so deeply.
And the names of your kids, and how old are they?
Claire is 4.5, Claire Celestine, and then our son Luke Raymond is almost 2.
And then what about this parish is the right fit for you all as you are raising your children?
I think one of the things that struck us when we first were introduced to the parish was the spirit of welcomeness that you feel here. It's such an open community. It feels just really warm. One thing in particular that I'll point to is not in every Catholic church can you come up to communion and get a blessing. And here that's never been a question, and so that's something that makes it comfortable for us as Whitney comes up. And on top of that, it just feels like there are so many opportunities to get involved. Everywhere we've looked to participate in different activities, again, it's been that spirit of welcome and just people willing to support each other. So it's just felt great from the get-go.
I really don't take for granted little things like the fact that there's a bulletin, which for me, growing up, we always had a bulletin, and I've attended a lot of other Catholic churches that don't have them, and the bulletin to me says, even if you haven't done this before, here's a guide, you're welcome here, and that means a lot to me. And I was really struck by how the parish is really big, but I still felt noticed. I still felt welcomed, and I felt like it wasn't just a community of people who were coming to receive the Eucharist, each individually. I felt like it was a community of people who were coming to be together to worship and receive Eucharist, and I felt like that was really important, that it wasn't just we're standing next to people, but it's just me and God. There's so much about that community and communion in that way that I feel like is really significant and not always, unfortunately, not found everywhere. So we were really struck by how great that was about the parish.
Everyone feels really welcoming towards the kids too. The nursery is great to have.
Yeah.
Claire is a bit of a spirited soul. She will do things like during the peace, bolt up and down the aisle and shake everyone's hand. And people are fine with that.
Yeah, she used to do, and when we were out in the commons for a while, when we had our son with us who, before he could go to nursery, just was really hard to constrain. So we'd be out in the commons when we were at worship, and Claire loves to do liturgical dance. So whenever the music would go, especially the Alleluia, that's her favorite that she likes to sing along with, but all of the hymns, she would just kind of come out in the middle and dance and twirl around. And part of me was a little concerned that others would feel like it was distracting, but it's such a beautiful way for her to connect with worship and on her own plane and on her own level. And I felt like I enjoyed that. I didn't feel ashamed of the kids or like they were unwelcome at the service. That means a lot to us because that's where we are right now. So.
And then what about your engagement? How was that marriage preparation for you both?
We knew at that point, we sort of took the steps we needed to do, contacted the necessary folks, and even though we were in a variety of locations, it all seemed to come together. And we really got a lot out of our pre-Cana session was great, and the NFP class was great. But actually, we did a lot of prep on our own as well. Andrew started reading Christopher West's Theology of the Body books, and we did a lot of thinking, particularly about theology of the body, because we wanted to really feel like when we were approaching marriage, we wanted to know how we were going to go into it, what sort of ethics we wanted to approach all aspects of marriage with, and that seemed really central to what it was going to be like for us. I don't know if you have more to say on that.
Yeah, I think by needing to go through the whole pre-Cana and discernment process, it's just a great opportunity to reflect and ask these kinds of questions. And like you said, it was extremely fruitful for us to be, challenged by certain church teachings, especially ones that aren't in the Episcopal tradition. And just that dialogue was something where we both grew and got a lot closer together. So it's
and
really nice.
we're preparers, we're studiers. So, and at the time we didn't have children, obviously, so we had time to read and talk a lot, and we really did do a lot of discernment. My parents would laugh at us sometimes and say, you guys are thinking a lot harder about all this stuff before you get married. And we kept saying, well, it's nice to think about it now before we're married, so we don't have to hash it all through. Although there are plenty of things, obviously, that you still have to hash through after you get married.
What would you want other young people to know about having that fruitful engagement experience? It sounds like you had.
I would say it really lays the foundation for a solid marriage. We were lucky that we had encountered certain things sort of on our own, because we had broken up and gotten back together. I think our healing process there, in conjunction with the church stuff, obviously, that came with engagement, but our healing process there involved a lot of figuring out how to communicate affection well to one another and how to relate together well. And that process was almost a pre-engagement process that really, I think, set the foundation for the marriage that we have now. I think we read Gary Chapman's 5 Love Languages, which was very important to us at the time. And I think we got that just as we were engaged. But it really harkened back to the conversations that we had had when we renewed our relationship a couple years previous. And then between that and then the prep that we got through the church, I think just thinking through a lot of those things, thinking through about what, having common priorities is such an important part of a successful marriage. Obviously, communication and being able to share affection appropriately with one another in ways that you want to receive it, which is the crux of the love languages, I think is a key pillar. But I think also just knowing what your priorities are for life and how you want to go about seeking those. What are your ethics? What are your goals? What's your mission for your life and for your family? I think that the church preparation did a lot to help us square that stuff away. And then there's practical stuff that you talk about too, money and sex and all that other stuff that I think it's really important. And in fact, I think that it's worth mentioning, as much as I feel a little uncomfortable talking about sex on video. I think that the fact that the church addresses sex and sexual ethics within marriage, within the pre-Cana, and then we also did an NFP class, and then our own reading on theology of the body. I think it's so important to talk about and think about, and it's been taboo. I feel really strongly that we need to talk more with our youth about sex than we do now, and setting the stage for thinking about sexual ethics within marriage also. But I feel like that was really something I would not, I think, have been as challenged about my thoughts about that had we not been in this ecumenical relationship. I love the Episcopal Church, and I'm not going to knock it here, but I don't think that I would have been quite as challenged because there were certain teachings in the Catholic Church that were not what I had thought that I was going to be signing up for. And I wasn't taken by surprise during the engagement, but just in the whole process of learning and coming together. And I really loved how I realized that the Catholic Church really took this seriously, that it was so important and so sacred and so beautiful a part of marriage. It wasn't just sex or, we don't want to talk about that. It's like, this is really a central part of marriage and a beautiful and sacred part of life and of marriage. And it's something that really merits being thought hard about. And I really appreciated how important and how sacred that was. And I think we really took that to heart in our preparation, and it's helped us set the stage for our life and what we want and how we feel aligned with God and the church within our living out of our marriage.
And so as you think about, general advice for folks preparing for marriage, as Whitney alluded to, it's not just about, figuring out who's going to do what chores or, the practical considerations of day-to-day life. It's about, what it means for your faith life and, how are you going to raise children and just all of these things that are so easy to gloss over unless you're sort of confronted with these questions. So,
and I think it's easy to listen to that and think, ooh, sounds like a chore, right? At first, I knew I had to figure out if we were going to get joint accounts and all this other stuff, but now I got to think about like, what do we want to do with church with the kids later on, and what do we think about certain things about sex, and do we really have to? But it's not. I feel like it's a great opportunity for both personal growth, but also a chance to have a fruitful time of growth together with your future spouse. And that really, like I said, it really sets the stage for the rest of your life. So it doesn't have to be
That's
an onerous
the key,
thing.
and it's not about figuring everything out, because you can't. You never will.
Yeah.
We're still figuring things out as we go, especially as the kids get older and dynamics change year after year. But it's about what's the foundation? What are the non-negotiables?
Right.
And are you committed to figuring it out together?
And I think learning to ask questions together, asking questions of one another, asking questions of God, asking questions of the church, learning to grow together, to be uncertain together, and to pursue that path, I think is a key part, and it's great to start that when you're setting your marriage up so that you can continue that process when you're married.
And so for all of the time that you spent in preparation, can you think of some examples of how that either enriched your marriage or made what may have been a stumbling block a little easier to deal with?
Good question. I'm trying to think.
Definitely the theology of the body stuff was difficult for me at first. And I really enjoyed that. I felt like it wasn't even just within our engagement. It was really even the year or so prior to that when we were reestablishing our relationship. I think when we reflected on all of that, and I think that definitely smoothed things out for later on, because if we had to figure that stuff out after we got married, I think it would have been a lot of heated discussions and difficult things. I think that certainly the preparations, figuring out how to communicate with one another best, really made it so that we could encounter difficult times or times of disagreement with respect.
I recall times of transition. So we've lived in different cities. We've contemplated, my going back to grad school or switching jobs. And anytime you confront a big, fork in the road in your life or that sort of thing, again, you've got such a firm foundation from all of that prep to understand what's important to the other and to be able to, to facilitate that dialogue. So.
Yeah, I think just having had to face those things and think hard about them makes it easier to go back to facing what's in front of you and thinking hard about it later on. It's not new territory.
And how about as you raise your children, how are you passing on your Christian faith?
Yeah, so lots of prayer. We're sort of in the routine of every single night before bed, when we get in the car, at meal times. Also, gosh, Whitney does a fantastic job introducing children's books that are faith-themed. We just found one on Lent that looks absolutely incredible. Doing activities with them around the holidays. I think Claire marched off to preschool one day and declared to her teacher, "It is such fun to go to school during Advent."
She doesn't go to a religious preschool, but she knows about Advent, and she loves Advent.
So just finding creative ways at their level to engage them in things like church seasons and traditions and telling stories, reading children's Bibles, all that kind of stuff. It's been
an exciting thing to get to experience that with them, although when children are so young, it's hard sometimes to find stuff that really you can get past the distraction and the craziness of kid life. But we do really enjoy trying to keep the church season at home. So we definitely I think we had 3 Advent calendars this year, and an Advent wreath, and there was a lot happening for Advent. And now we're trying to decide what sort of practices we want to put into place with Lent, which is a harder one. But we definitely enjoy doing those things at home. We also attend this parish regularly, and we also attend an Episcopal parish in Northside, St. Thomas Episcopal Church, and then we attend church when we frequently travel to visit our parents. So we attend church there in Stanton and in Vienna as well. So they see a variety of churches. And now that Claire is old enough that she stays through the service and goes to Children's Chapel or Children's Liturgy, she connects with that more. But Claire really enjoys experiencing all aspects of the church itself. Too, she likes to we go to the Statue of Mary, and we'll say the Hail Mary prayer with her after Mass. And she's trying to figure out the chapel and the host and adoration, and so she will like to go in sometimes to the chapel and be quiet for a minute or two, and then she's a little nervous about being quiet and then wants to leave. But I think just beginning that experience it's really beautiful to see her curiosity there and opening that up to her. So we've enjoyed that a lot.
What forms of prayer are most helpful to you both?
First?
Sure. I am somebody who has a lot of ideas in my head. My 4-year-old and I have this in common, and I find it difficult sometimes to stay on target. Both of us discovered Ignatian prayer relatively recently, and we like it a lot. I do tend to get a little lost. So I actually find that for me personally, when I'm praying alone, outside of just the "Dear God, please let him take a nap," which I do a lot. I like to journal, and I like to journal questions. I like to journal Bible reading, and it keeps me on track, and it helps me sort of put my questions out there and put my discoveries out there, make connections. So lately, I've been praying with Bible reading and journaling together, and that does a lot for me outside of just what I do with the kids, which is in the evening and in the car. And we do pray together regularly in the evenings at the end of the day, which I take for granted now because we've been doing it for so long, but it's a really special thing that we have the opportunity to pray together and communicate with one another and with God together that way.
And when you pray in the car with the kids, can you give us an example of what you would do?
It's pretty much the same thing every day, but usually when we start our day and we're driving off to drop off my daughter at preschool, it's like, okay, dear God, thank you for this morning. Thank you for the chilly, cold winter. Thank you for Dada making breakfast. And thank you for going to school. Please keep us safe and healthy today and help us to be loving. And then we try to remember if there's anybody who needs extra prayers, anybody who's sick or hurting, but sort of keep us safe and help us to be kind, and just a good way to start off the morning.
And I'll actually share a method of prayer that works really well for me, and this one I actually got from Father coming out of the confessional, but I'm happy to share it. So I won't tell you what sins I was confessing that prompted it, but he suggested, so on your morning commute, do some prayerful meditation around things in your life that you are thankful for. But don't just say, God, thank you for X. Say, thank you for X because, and then fill in the blank. And what I found was that really puts you in this mode where you're fully appreciating, specifically why you're thankful for that. And then the richness of the gifts that God has given you really comes up. So that's something that's been particularly helpful for me. And like you said, the Ignatian prayer, where you're putting yourself, physically in a scene from a biblical story or something like that, really does a lot, I think, again, to evoke that richness and the extra details of your surroundings.
Music is also really important for us. I'm not sure. I think it counts certainly as prayer. We're both musicians. Andrew is a trumpet player, although these days you mostly play ukulele with the kids, which is great. It's wonderful. And I play cello. I sometimes play here in the orchestra at St. Mary's. I don't play a whole lot these days, but we both played a lot growing up. And music for us is really important, and we really enjoy singing hymns at church and at home. And sometimes listening to religious music. But we mostly do singing and listening at church. And I think that is one way in which we both feel very connected. I cry a lot. It's good crying. I think my daughter's a little confused, but Andrew will look over at me. They'll start playing and throw a chord substitution in there, and I'm like, it's so beautiful, But I think that's a way in which God really communicates to the depths of both of us, and it's a beautiful, if rather emotional, way to connect.
Sounds like that really does stir your soul.
It does, yeah. I think especially being a parent, I don't know, I think after, when I was pregnant with my daughter, we would go to church and I felt like I would just weep the whole time.
Well, what we'll find too is that, certain songs will present themselves, and they will be ones that are significant from our past, like ones that Whitney used to sing at her Shrine Month camp growing up, or ones that I used to sing at St. Francis growing up. And there's something about, you feel like you're home, or you feel like you're connected when you hear all of that. And that's just something about music, that it has the power to make those emotional and spiritual connections, which is so profound.
So it sounds like music has been a big part of bringing you closer to God. Are there some other times in your life when you've really felt close to God?
Marriage is the big one for me. Confirmation's the big one. When the kids were born, I would say. It's just one of those situations where you're getting this overwhelming, physically,
You almost
emotionally.
passed out both times.
That's a little different, but I'm talking about what is going on here? Oh my gosh, there's this new person, and this is like my family, and this is my wife, and oh my gosh, what is happening? And overwhelmed by a sense of gratitude and awe at what's going on. So that's certainly one I would point to.
Yeah. My growing up at camp was very profound for me, and being a counselor was also a very profound experience for me, sort of on the other side in a similar vein. And I think that being together, certainly getting married was a very profound time, and just the day-to-day with the kids, you'll get into the pedestrian of diaper changes and everybody yelling at the lunch table and all that stuff. And then Claire said something the other night to Luke. She said, "Luke, you might not know this yet, but God is really special." And I was very struck by that. It was something that I needed to hear that day too. And so they really surprise you. And she says she's the kind of girl who's always saying things that catch us off guard. But hearing that innocent and loving expression of her sense of God really, I think, does a lot to bring us closer to God also. And I certainly also, in playing music and singing, I find that participating in music can be a really spiritual experience for me. Playing in an orchestra or playing in a small group really takes you out of yourself. It's hard work too, but I definitely perceive a spiritual element to creating music. I feel that really deeply.
How about, has there ever been a time in your life where you've been going through some kind of struggle and your faith has been there to help you? Are there any examples you can think of that you'd like to share?
Well, I'm actually going through a bit of a difficult time right now. We recently lost a close family friend a few weeks ago, and it was a surprise, and just confronting grief in that way is relatively new to me in my life, and so it's been a challenge to be reminded so abruptly of our mortality and the physical world around us when I spend a lot of time thinking about intellectual and spiritual stuff and not so grounded in the physical. And that's been a major shakeup in my life and my mind, and my faith is swirling in circles right now, and I am very grateful for the communities of faith that I have, for Andrew's support, for the kids, helping me find my way to a new place. It's a time of growth and a time of discovery, and I'm very grateful for not only the communities, but also just the life of faith that I have lived already that lays that foundation for a sense of belovedness, which is something that you sort of grope for when you're in a time of discernment or a time of uncertainty.
There have also been some pretty challenging times with the kids, especially when they're really little. You're not getting any sleep. You're absolutely in the throes of it. It feels like the walls are closing in and there's no light at the end of the tunnel. But centering yourself in prayer in some of those moments and trusting that things are going to work out. That's actually a practice that we do. Each year we sort of sit down and think about, okay, where are we in our faith lives and what are we working on? And we pick a sort of a word to meditate on. This year our word is trust. In all of the challenges of parenthood and other things going on in our lives, challenging us to seek a new level of being able to trust in God, and what does that mean for us? In past years, we've picked words like abundance when we felt scarce.
Or stewardship was last year.
Right.
And that can mean we decide to compost and be good stewards of the earth. Or it can also mean, how do we steward our gifts? How do we steward our resources? How do we steward our children? So it's just February, and we're figuring out how to live into this trust word, but I'm excited about what that's going to be for this year. I think it's nice to have something to come back to ground you in your intentions for the year. So.
Well, in addition to helping you through this difficult time, how has the community here at St. Mary's Parish helped you both?
I thought it was really nice after Mass. This was right when she was sick, before she passed, our friend. You went up to Father and described the situation. He was very, cordial and warm, and said he'd keep her in his prayers, and that was really nice.
Father's really fabulous in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
We don't take him for granted, for sure, but we definitely feel like his support and what he does with the parish makes a big difference in how we feel here, and knowing that we feel supported and welcomed. The parish has also been a great opportunity. We've had some great opportunities for sort of learning and continuing development. We attended a couple of speakers. We love Father Jim Martin, and we came to hear him speak a year or two ago, and he was great. And we also came to hear Brother Consolmagno from the Vatican Observatory, which was a wonderful experience. And we brought some friends. Actually, we have friends who are in an interfaith marriage. She's Presbyterian and he is Jewish, and they're both scientists, and they really enjoyed the talk, and it was really fun to get to connect. And actually, when we came to hear Father Jim, we brought some Episcopal friends of mine too, who are big fans of him. So that's been a fun way to connect at the parish. And then we attended the book study that Father led on Father Jim's book about building a bridge between the gay and lesbian Catholic community and the Catholic Church, and that was a wonderful, wonderful book group, and something that just really cemented how much I love the Church and how loving and intentional Father's approach is to many things, including the LGBT community and how marginalized they've been. And I felt really good about the beautiful way in which that book and the book study engaged the Church, engaged the LGBT community, and the larger community in coming together to think about something that's a really important issue for our time. And to me, that says a lot about Father and about St. Mary's as a church that is not just sitting back, but is thinking about, what are we called to discern right now? What are we called to apply our wisdom to learn about, to continue to grow in God's love and God's teaching right now in this moment? So we really enjoyed learning and growing, and then felt sort of bolstered in our commitment to the community, I think, through that.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share about your faith journey?
We have said before that being an ecumenical family is a little bit of a microcosm of the universal church. When we are really struggling with an issue where we disagree, or there are fine points that we just are both uncertain about, we feel almost like we're having just a tiny sense of the feeling of the grappling between religious traditions within the Christian church, and obviously even broader than that. And it gives us a sense of just desire, that strong longing for harmony that I don't think that we would feel elsewise. It's frustrating. There are times when it's so frustrating. It is difficult that we can't receive communion together. That is really hard for both of us, and for our broader families, because we come from families that really honor and love the Eucharist, and at this point we cannot all receive communion together, and it's a challenge. And we feel so strongly that longing to have harmony where we can all feel unity together with God and with one another. And there are other points that we really desire to agree on or come to an understanding together on. And I think both the beauty of diversity of practice and understanding, but also that frustration and the tension felt between us and our faith, I think reflects the universal church in a way that it gives us a window into seeing something deeply that we wouldn't necessarily be aware of otherwise. And I think it makes us both long more and more for that harmony and unity between traditions than the church.
That's right, and journey is the right word for it. I mean, it's just like when we were dating and challenging ourselves with these questions. That doesn't stop, and it's a gift in a way, even though it's a struggle in other ways.
It's absolutely a gift and a challenge. And we know that we're never going to come to perfect understanding of things, and I think we just continue walking the path and seeking guidance, and our communities are supporting us in those ways, in those paths.
Well, we're very grateful that you're here and walking that journey.
No, thanks.
Thank you.
Absolutely.